Rugby, have you seen the Galoma list? No, there's just a piece of paper that says Argos the Many-Eyed and those weird lamps you buy from the mall made out of fiber optics. Oh, that's it? Neat.
Let's talk about the Galoma. Rugby, what am I looking at here? I mean, is it a horse or a hydra? It's got claws on it, but it's also got weird eye stalk hair. It's like Beta Ray Bill and Medusa had a baby. Why are there no pictures of this on the internet? I realize now I might have phrased that wrong. Don't Google that. I spent some time digging into why the Galoma are called the Galoma and why they look like weird spidery horse people, but to no effect. I even went as far as trying to contact Paizo, but no one responded to me, and the authors are surprisingly hard to get a hold of. So if you're out there, let me know, I guess. The Galoma are prey. They are hunted. They have irrational fear and mistrust. You know what? Mistrust doesn't sound strong. Distrust, doubt, misgiving, suspicion, skepticism, maybe? Let's go with lack of sureness of anything with two eyes. Because apparently having two eyes makes you like some kind of master hunter in search of more eyeballs. I mean, But I suppose if your whole creation myth was based around people trying to steal your eyeballs, you'd probably be a little distrustful of them. I mean, I guess they could be lording their eyes above other people instead, but that's neither here nor there. Let's talk about stats. Galoma get bonuses to their wisdom and a stat of their choice, which is pretty great. Galoma are essentially decked out to not be caught in combat. And that is not that they're very stealthy or they blend in well to the background. It's more that they don't get into combat. Their features include things like ambush awareness. In first edition, it lets you roll for initiative even if the enemies are getting a surprise round. In second edition, it gives you a +2 to initiative rolls and you always win ties. That's pretty great. Honestly, if somebody wants to play a Galoma, I would give them both the first and second edition feat just kind of mashed into one. For 5e, advantage on everything. Anything perception based, initiative based, roll for initiative all the time. It's great. The Galoma feat trait literally just says you have lots of eyes. Just roll with it. If you have the ability to cast Detect Magic, you can take something like Arcane Sight, which builds all the way up into True Gaze at level 17, which basically allows you to use a true seeing spell once per hour. I think my favorite is still Watchful Gaze, which at level 1 allows you to use an action to just not be flanked. And then level 9, Constant Gaze just makes you immune to flanking forever. Like, that's awesome. Especially for a heritage that doesn't have a lot of active combat enhancements. This lets you pull yourself out of some of the dangers of combat. Or at level 5, you could take the Fey Ancestry and just blast a unicorn horn onto your head. I mean, it's a free heal. Do what you're going to do. It's pretty unique among the other ancestries in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. That mixed with a few other options like Defensive Instincts or Protective Claws, and you basically become either a hyper-defensive tank or a stealthy shadow creature that can never be found or ambushed. Either one of those is pretty awesome. The story goes that way back when the world was many-eyed, some evil god came to take everyone's eyes. That is, except for the Galoma. So they are now the only race retaining their original number of eyes, which could explain why they think all the other two-eyed creatures want to hunt them. Wait, did that get blurred because I said hunted or because you thought I said they humped them? Awesome. Essentially hyper-paranoid deer horse noodle creatures that have what essentially breaks down into perfect vision. Not perfect senses, just vision, which does make a difference. So I kind of love them. Found in the Screaming Jungles, these bad boys have a unique ability called eyes in the back of their hair. Wait. I read that wrong. The ability is called eyes in the back because their hair is literally just more eyes. I feel like it's a pretty big missed opportunity there. Rugby, laugh at my jokes. Eyes in the back essentially allows them to look in two different directions at once, or as two small bursts while doing a perception check, which to most people won't make any sense. This may just be an artifact of Pathfinder 2nd Edition having the seek as an action, allowing you to scan for a specific creature or object in an area, usually a 30-foot cone or 15-foot burst within your sight range. And that slows the game way down. At the same time, it gives players a lot more options to find and discover invisible creatures, while making actions like the hide and concealment effects much more robust than in older editions. So this might just break down to the difference between having a passive perception and an active perception, which in the case of the Galoma, I would give them all the advantages they have on passive to active and vice versa. Is that normal? Do people do this cone of vision thing? I don't know. I think there's a lot of wiggle room there, especially if you are taking feats specifically to enhance one version or the other. I love feat trees. Having an in-game mechanical progression of low light vision, dark vision, blind fighting, detect magic, true sight is a very clean-cut form of character progression. And there have been a lot of ways to do that going back several editions, but a few of them are kind of linked to races directly. Getting at-will or permanent sense magic on drows used to be my kind of go-to, but having all of these be useful really relied on your DM and how your DM perceived your character's perception. For the most part, people don't use perception rules as written because they can be cumbersome and slow. I used to complain a lot because in the early days of 3.5, I felt like everyone had dark vision and things like torches and dancing lights just didn't matter. Light is a cool spell. Every cleric should have light ready to go. Etch in a bunch of small coins or wooden symbols with your holy symbol on it, And then you have a near infinite amount of glow sticks that you can just huck at people left and right. Take that, you dumb vampires. Not to mention alchemical glow rods, sun rods, jars of light. Lighting should be a very important part of your game, and everyone just kind of ignores it.
Don't even get me started on dancing lights.
With the addition of virtual tabletops and dynamic lighting, light and light levels are being thrown back into the mix, which I really love. I will oftentimes be the one that wants to carry the torch or the magic bucket around in video games for the party, and I really do think that it adds a level of difficulty and complexity to combat when different people can only see specific things, or if one person has to be in charge of the visual space of the combat. It's one of the reasons that I love the Gloomstalkers as well, but that's probably a whole nother video. The downside to this is that when you're doing theater of the mind or playing on a game mat, it's really hard to keep track of what people can or can't see, and this is further complicated by how the information of what one player sees is being transferred to another. There have been many games where one person having dark vision in the party is enough to kind of let everybody else know what's going on. With that, things like sense of smell aren't taken into account for perception very often, and it's something that the DM has to actively go out and participate in and remind people of what they are perceiving. It can be really difficult. And that's why I think that these horse monsters just kind of fell by the wayside. I mean, they are super creepy, which is also a thing. Pathfinder 2nd Edition essentially runs everything through the observed effect, which gives a lot more power to people that are trying to stealth, so long as you're only using vision as the way to counteract. In older editions, if you had somebody stealth or go invisible with the invisibility spell, your only options were to detect magic or randomly attack the air and hope they bump into you. But now the only stipulation is that you hide or are not observed long enough to hide. Everyone is invisible when they stealth, which is kind of cool. That makes rogues way more powerful, as they can essentially just walk across the room with half speed, but it also gives a lot more power back to the players to be able to deal with those kind of random situations that you don't run into all the time. And then the Goloma are now the experts at finding invisible creatures, which is kind of awesome. That, or you have to start telling your DM exactly where you're looking at all times, which seems highly tedious, but also I might start asking my players that. Were you looking at the dragon or the goblin that just stole your wallet? The goblin that what now? Never mind. Let me just write that down. Players deafened by magic or loud rooms should really have to use directional based perception. So some of these rules can be really cool and add some complexity to the game. It's like difficult terrain, but for your ears or your eyes, depending on how you're looking at it. The Goloma, being a race based completely around vision, is kind of awesome. And I really hope we get more information on them in the future. Because right now, things like bears with scent negate these rules. Dragons with true sight and magic senses can negate some of these rules, but there aren't currently any player races that can see the world in ultra high def 4K, which I think is kind of sad because a lot of what your characters perceive in the game come directly from your dungeon master. And having one player that should maybe get a little more insight or have a little wider angle of a view can be a really fun tool for telling a story. So while you could play a Goloma as someone who just negates combat all the time, just at the chagrin of your DM, you could also play someone that just has a hyper insight to everything around them. Very meticulous inspectors, highly knowledgeable rangers, or you could also just play a druid that when they transform into a bear has 1,000 eyes. That doesn't sound creepy at all. Let's go for that. So whatever you do, get out there, have fun with it. Keep your dice on the table, everybody. I feel like if anything actually does manage to sneak up on one of these guys, immediate saving throw against peeing yourself and running away in fear. You don't want to sneak up on one of these weird horse monsters in the dark. It's just a billion little dots of green glowing eyes and then horse face.